Hi everybody, here we are back again for another Woodworking Wisdom on Tuesday. I've had a nice break, so I thought we'd come back with a nice, easy demonstration for you, and we're going to do some spatulas. I've got a selection of spatulas down here. We're going to have a quick look at that. By the way, we have Stephanie. We have a new camera lady on the cameras today. So we've got Steph on cameras and we've got Ben on questions. You know the form. If you've got questions, please ask. It makes my life a lot easier. So ask away when you're ready. So let's just have a quick look at what we've got. So we've got a good selection of spatulas down here. It's just a few different ones I've been experimenting with, really. They're really nice to make. And obviously, with a spatula, it's a project that we can use in the kitchen or give away, that sort of thing. They are, if I take that one away, they are turned. I'll put that one back, though. This one is just a little bit of woodworking. It's a flat piece of timber. And we'll look at the timbers we're going to use in a moment. But this is a flat piece of ash, actually made whilst the timber was still wet. So we have actually got a little bit of a cupping going on there, and that's absolutely fine. Doesn't matter at all. So there we are, a bit of ash there. We've got a bit of tulip here with a little coloured handle. Obviously, it's down to you what you do, and you can see the sort of shaping that we've got there. Got a little bit of Iroko. Again, a fairly nice material to turn. Be careful, though. Some people can be allergic to the dust that comes from that one. A couple bits of elm here. I would say, now let's look at this large one here. That's more of a like a flipping spatula. That one's really, really nice one to hold. And then we've got the long handle one. This is the one we're going to try and make today, the long handled elm one. We're actually going to use another piece of this wet ash, though, just because it turns really, really nicely and it's got a lovely color to it. So if you hold the camera there, let me just take the ready-made spatulas away and bring the timber that we're going to use. If I do that, you'll see what I've done. Okay, so we've got literally a few slices of timber. Now, the ones I'm making today are made from this thick sort of 25mm inch stuff. But the flat ones that I showed you are literally just slithers like this. So pretty much all of the timber can be used. So out of that one, you can quite easily get one of the flat ones, work out where that one comes from, and literally make your first one that you make is your template for the next few. If you're going to make one, you might as well make a few at a time. We're going to look at the sanding of these as well, though. We're going to look at the turning, the sanding, and then the finishing. This is a nice food-safe oil on here, and even if it's wet, it doesn't really matter. What this one would benefit from now is just a very light denibbing with a very fine abrasive, and then a bit more oil, and he'll be ready to go. So there. So right, let's look at where we're going to start. So get rid of the timber. There's a little bit of preparation we're going to do here. So let's go right from a piece of timber like that. Okay, so it's a fairly lumpy bit of timber, 25mm. In fact, let me give you the full measurements. It's probably oversized, if I'm honest. The width of this one, so it's 90mm at the moment by 25 by, we are on 400 long. It's a bit too long, really, for what I want to get out of it. Here's one that I sort of prepped up earlier, and you can see the sort of dimensions that we've got. So you can, if you've got a plank of timber, you can get sort of several out of it by doing that, marking around sort of thing. So that's the timber we're starting with. From that bit of timber, your preparation is that there. Okay, so we're just basically making the rough spatula shape. Okay, like I said, a card template or your first one that you make can do this, the same sort of thing. And then that's now ready for the lathe. So you may have seen things like wooden spoons made, scoop spoons, tea caddies, that sort of thing. It's a similar sort of health and safety sort of warning we're going to give you here. This isn't a complete round that's spinning on the lathe all the time. You've got big flat faces coming around. So we've got to be a little bit aware of what's happening on the machine, where your fingers are. Look at the ghosting that's about to happen. The camera should pick that up in a minute, but just be aware of those few things. Now, at the moment, this is far too thick. If you look at where we end up, something like this, you can see the difference. Now, that will be cut on the bandsaw afterwards, and I'll show you how to do it, or demonstrate how to do that safely in a second. We need to do some turning first, though. So let's get rid of the bulk of the material, turn a nice handle, we'll sand it up, and then we'll look at how you would balance all that safely. So the centers that we're using, I've got a Pro drive on the business end, the drive center. Okay, so that's a sprung center with splines on it. Now, what that does for us, it gives us lots of drive, but it's not too big. We're then on the tailstock. If I can bring the tailstock into play, there we are. The tailstock, we've got a ring center. And it's the same sort of thing. I don't want to use a single pointed tailstock center purely because if I did, it's likely to split the timber open. Remember, we're working on fairly thin areas of timber. So ring center on that side, and I've got a Pro drive on here. You could, if you had a big enough ring center, use the ring center to drive as well. If you had an actual drive center, a ring drive center. But I've got the Pro drive here, 16 mil. It works really, really well. I'm going to turn... we're going to turn that way around. Sorry, we're going to turn that way around because I want the thinner end to be work last and to be given maximum support. So let's get everything set up. Okay, so just activating that Pro drive. So that's nice and tight in there now. Everything nicely tightened up. My first area to work is going to be this end here. Okay. So we're going to play with that end first. Going to get a long tool rest working. And whenever I need to move the tool rest, I'm going to stop the lathe. We've got a big area of flat material spinning. Okay, so it's quite important that we stop the lathe. And my choice of tool to take this down to a round. And remember, we're only worried about this round edge here. Choice of tool for that is going to be a roughing gouge. Okay, nice and safe with that one. You could progress to a skew if you wanted to, but look at this timber. It's quite wavy. There's grain flying all over the place. The skew probably wouldn't be the best choice for that timber there. It literally is waving along. It's like a big ripple. So not going to be effective really on this piece. So let's do the first couple of cuts. Any questions? Fire them away. Fire them away. Ben's there ready and primed to ask you questions today. Now I've stood to one side. I've turned the machine on. Let me just to give you a little bit of a better view, I'm going to bring things over. Bring the tailstock back up again. There we go. You get a little bit more in view now. Same thing though. I haven't changed the height of the tool rest yet. Height is just below center. Remember, we're going to be using a roughing gouge. Checking everything's secure. All my locks are in place. I'm going to turn the lathe speed back down to 0 again because I've moved a few things on the lathe. Slowly creep the speed up. Now I'm hoping, certainly from the view that you've got at the moment, you can see the ghosting. So you can see the sort of shape that we've already prepped up. But it's not an even shape at the moment. We need to create those curved edges. So I'm going to turn at a fairly fast rate. So there we are. That's 1600 revs. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to go for a roughing gouge. And I'm just going to skim down. Just toward the handle. And we'll work on making that handle nice and round in a minute and give it some decoration once we finish the main spatula head. Now I'm going to stop this fairly regularly. I want to see where everything is lying. So let's have a look. And also to see whether this is rounded over. That's round. I've got a flat on this side, so we still need to keep going. Yes, Ben, we've got a question.
Okay, so a question from Frederick. Is there any wood that you wouldn't use? And he thought that elm was not conducive to healthy.
Not that I know. I mean, elm is used quite a lot for pestles and mortars, that sort of thing. Breadboards as well. Things probably avoid things like yew and laburnum. Certainly softwoods are no good. They're not strong enough. So cedars, for instance, again, it causes a bit of a problem when you're trying to turn one of these. This is ash. like I say, I've got the elm works well, tulip works well, the Iroko works really well, sycamore, maple, beech is another good one. So all of those sort of timbers, really. Yes.
And then James is asking, could you use a live pro drive in the tailstock instead of the cup drive?
Yeah, you could. Because we're not changing the thickness of timber here at the moment. It's staying an inch all the way through the turning process. We're only taking that spatula end down once we finish the turning, because the turning process, all that's doing is making the outside edge nice and uniform, and then we can cut to its final shape. The reason I don't cut to its final shape before we do the turning is it makes it too weak. There's not enough material left, so you get a lot of whipping. So we keep that until the very end. The problem always used to be then, okay, you haven't got much to play with on the bandsaw, and obviously we don't want to take any shortcuts or mess around on the bandsaw, so we're going to use a couple of woodpackers to make it safe to do so. So look, we got a little bit more to take away here, a couple of flats on this side, then we can start working on the handle itself. I'll take a little bit more of this width away from the very top as well, but I like to keep it fairly flared and tapered. Have another check, see where we are. Remember, turn the lathe off. Don't try and feel for round when you're on a piece of timber like this. It doesn't work. And also, don't worry about this. These fibers that are broken away. That's not going to be there in a minute. We're going to actually take away a lot of that thickness, so it's fine. All right. Okay, so let's start just a little bit more off of that area before we do the handle. Okay, so that the actual spatula part of it's done. So if we move tool rest along, I didn't realise, I should have realised really, because it comes from a rippled ash tree. I didn't realise how rippled this piece of timber is. That's fine. It's going to give a much better finished spatula in terms of timber, but it does make it a little bit harder to turn in thinner section. That's my excuse at this stage. Yes, Ben.
So Hodgepodge is asking, any wood recommendations of using to stir hot food over a stove?
Well, beech is used. You know, most of your wooden spoons that you buy from shops are made out of beech, so stick with that sort of thing. Sycamore and maple, I know, is really good as well. And I'm about to use some food safe oil, but for hot foods, food safe oil, any oil will come off. So probably wise just to leave it with the raw timber. It will stain. I mean, or wooden utensils will stain after a while if you're using things like paprika in your food, all that sort of stuff. It's a natural dye, so it will stain a little bit, but you know, that's part of its aging process, that natural patina. It looks quite nice for it. But no, things like beech, sycamore, maple, they're all really good to work with. Okay, let's work the handle. We are going to do a little bit of sanding on this one as well. So we're going down to round. Once you get down to this is basic turning, really. I mean, we're nice and round here. We've got no flat areas. So it's going to be a basic spindle turning. So I just want to show you, before I finish this handle, just want to show you this transition area here. So you can see what I'm concentrating on is just getting down past the flats. So I've got solid round to work with. Just made it on this side, okay? We've got a little bit of a flat here. But now I know that that's fine. I can start thinking about the shape. I don't have to worry about anything at all. Yes, Ben?
So Callum's asking, it says on the previous video, you said you do a lot of green turning. If you do a lot of green turning, a planing blade for a grinder was handy for taking off lumps. Which blade? Do you know what blade it was?
Just read that question again.
So on a previous video, you said that if you do a lot of green turning, a planing blade for a grinder was handy for taking off lumps. Which blade?
I'm not quite sure on that question. Just ask that one again if we've asked it wrong. Just pose that question again, because I'm not quite following that question at the moment. I do a lot of wet turning. I was turning only yesterday a load more of this rippled ash that I've mentioned before. Turbo plane? Might be. If it's the turbo plane you're thinking about, or the Arbortech, and those are used. Well, I tend to use them more often when I'm doing the really big pieces, and then only because if I put a big piece on and it's just hitting the bed in a little corner, I can just whip it off. Or if I've got a big lump, so an unbalanced piece, I can just whip a section away rather than resorting back to the chainsaw again. So if you're thinking about an angle grinder, it's Arbortech blades that we're using, either the Arbortech Pro or the standard Arbortech. Yeah. Right, so let's carry on with rounding this down. I'm also going to take this down a little bit thinner as well. Now we've got a rippled timber, so you've got to be quite careful with this sort of thing. If you go too thin, you will get a lot of bounce. You'll also get a lot of breakout and ripple if you use things like skew chisels, especially in this sort of diameter. So that's why I'm sticking with the rough and gouge. Now, I would start, if you've never made anything like this before, start with a nice small one. So there we are. There's a nice little tulip wood one, look. So a fraction of the size of this one we're making. That's a good way to start you off, just to get used to all the stresses and strains that you get with one of these things. Yes, Ben?
So Nicholson's asking, what size gouge are you using right now?
So this is a 3/4 rough and gouge, so 19 mil rough and gouge. There we are. Then we're going to go over, you can guess what we're going to use next, because we haven't used one yet. We're going to go over to a signature skew, turn the lathe up, off, of course, move the tool rest, get the tool rest up high, make sure nothing's touching the tool rest, and we're just going to create a little area where we can take away the waste at the end of the project, because at the moment, we've got the Pro Drive up here, and that's going to leave marks. So I want to be able to take that away, and we'll sand that or cut that away afterwards. So there, let's do a little bit of cleaning up of that face if it lets me. Remember what I said about the ripple can cause problems. We'll do another little V cut. There we are. We'll roll a little bead over. Let's put a couple of little marks in there. We might need to revisit these marks when we finish sanding. They might have might have disappeared. So there we are. Just a couple of, let's put a third one in. There we are. Power of 3. Look, looks better. And then because this is a little bit too narrow for that skew, I'm going to go to a beading and parting tool. Take that down a little bit. You could, if you wanted to, put a little bit of leather on the end here to hang this with. Put a little hole in this area to tie your leather through. Bearing in mind that, you know, constant washing of the leather might make it a little bit soggy. So depending on what you're going to use it for, obviously. Let's stop and have a look at the final shape. We'll answer a few more questions whilst we're doing it. Yes, Ben?
So Kevin's asking, is your tool rest on or above centre when using the skew?
Skew, I want to be cutting above centre. So what I tend to say, when you're using a rough and gouge, from centre down up to about 6 mil. When you're using skew chisel, the same thing, but above centre. Now that will differ slightly depending on your own height. So if you're very tall, then your tool rest needs to be a lot higher. If you're very short, then opposite, you need to bring it down a little bit. Basically what we're trying to do is stop that long point, the toe of the skew, from grabbing. And if the tool rest is a long way below centre, the so is that long point of the skew, and it's more likely to catch. So we want to get that up high and out the way. What you don't want to be doing, though, when you're using the skew is having your arm up here. So that's why we vary the height. So if I'm planing cuts, for me, comfortably, I want to be stood like this. Tool rest too high, and I'm going to be up like that. So that's got to be avoided, you see. So that's why we vary the height a little bit. All right. We must be about time to do some more stuff on the skew sooner than later. We've got a few things coming up that people have been asking. Certainly skew chisels is one of them, but sharpening again. And we're going to look at some hand sharpening because there's loads of jigs out there, and I'm using a jig all the time, but some people really struggle with hand sharpening also. So we're going to look at those in a couple of weeks' time, actually. Right, let's do some sanding. Again, we've got a few issues to think about when we're sanding, like our own safety. I'm just going to tidy up this cut first. So again, we've got that horrible big flat section running around there. Look. Tool rest out the way. Big thing. If you have your tool rest in position when you're sanding, your fingers are going to get caught somewhere. So take your tool rest out the way. Nothing's in your way now. Now, if we use our hand to sand here, so we're going to use a bit of abrasive, what will happen is our hand will fall into the voids. And although that's not dangerous because of the speed, as long as the spatula is dragging across the surface of the paper, that's not overly dangerous. It will hurt after a while because it's basically slapping your hand. Lathe speed would need to be high, but what you would do is soften quite badly these leading corners here, which is not ideal. So we're going to use just a block of timber, just a scrap bit of timber, and put up with the noise and just very gently run that along that surface while that's spinning. We can go back to hand sanding when we come back to this section here. All right, so just be aware of that. Don't turn the lathe speed down. We want the speed to stay the same in this instance. It's going to help us. It's going to create more surface contact here. So dust extraction is going on. We're going to go through my usual sanding grade. So we're going to go from 100 to 150 to 240 to 400. Bearing in mind that once we've done that, we still have this area to finish. Okay, so dust extraction going on. Just before I start that, Ben, no more questions just yet? No, we're all good. So a little bit of noise. You should still hear me. I'm going to get that dust extractor nice and close. Lathe speed staying the same speed. Starting off with 100 grit. Let's have a quick look at that just to see how that's coped. There we are, that's looking nice. Now, you think about direction of grain. The grain is running up through this piece. So what we can now, as we've got a block of timber here, start sanding. Let's get rid of all those horrible looking bits. Sand the edge, help out the rotary sanding. And we'll do this all the way down through all the grades. So again, of course, the easy bit here. So that's your 100. So now we're going to whip through all the other grades. So as I'm hand sanding, let's start hand sanding with the 150. Bearing in mind this is a wet timber. I say wet, it's not massively wet. This has probably been down now about 8 months. So because it's ash, it starts to dry quite quickly, and so it's doing quite a good job of drying. There we are. We'll do another hand sand. There we are, now 240. Starting off with rotary, and then we'll hand sand. Bit of hand sanding. You know what it's like. Go through the routine, go through the grades. And then we're down to 400. You may not find that you need 400. Ash, again, it's one of those timbers that you can get away with quite a lot. Right, nearly there. That'll do us. There we are. So, yes, Ben.
So Callum's just saying he started using tongue oil recently.
Yeah.
What do you think of the finish, and would it go well on a spatula, seeing as though it's food safe?
Yeah, tongue oil is derived from nuts, so just be aware of that. Make sure that all the allergy thing is. Make sure the people you give it to know what finish it's been treated with. Tongue oil is great. The only thing is, like any natural oil, doesn't have a drying agent in it. So tongue oil is exactly the same as walnut oil, as lemon oil. All of those things don't have drying agents in, so it just takes a little bit longer to dry. But yeah, they're nice oils. They're nice oils. There's not a huge amount of smell to them. You know, you think about lemon oil, it's got quite a smell. Even walnut oil's got quite a smell. But tongue oil is fairly inert in that way. But yeah, no problem at all with it. No problem at all. Let's just cut off the waste wood. All right, Ben? There we are. We're just getting through to the point that's stuck. We can take that one off. Peel that off. So that's something ready to sand now. Okay, so we're going to put the sander on, and we're going to move from the one that I've just done to the one that I've prepped ready for sanding. Now look what we have here. Okay, can you go to camera 3 a minute there? So there we are. That's the difference between the one that's just done here, okay, with all that material on there, to the one that's ready to sand. All I've done with this one, the one that's ready to sand, is I've cut the waste wood away. And to do that, you need to clamp it to a flat, straight piece of timber. So there we are. So a nice straight piece of timber, and make sure you've got one surface that's flat that can go on the table. I use a bandsaw, and that with that bandsaw, then I can cut my curve back in it. But you don't want to be trying to cut that on its own. It's got a radius surface there already. It won't be safe. You'll have an accident. You will hurt yourself. So it does need to be clamped to a flat piece of timber ready to use on the bandsaw. And all I tend to do then is do the outside curve first. Okay, so let me just turn this around. Cut the outside curve first, which you could mark with a pencil. I tend to do it by eye. Then flip it round, clamp this to your piece of timber, and just follow that curve on the inside. It's a fairly simple process, but you do need to clamp it to timber. It will not be safe if you don't do that. Okay, so a good flat piece of timber. The wider you can make it here, the better. And just bear in mind that you want to try and avoid clamping the area that you're going to cut through, because if you've got any form of pressure on there when you create the cut, it's going to close onto the saw blade. It's quite important. So try and get it back up here somewhere. Okay. Yes, Ben.
So a couple of questions. First one from Rick. Would using something like spalted alder be okay?
To be quite honest, anything spalted I tend to avoid when it comes to kitchen utensils. Anything you're going to use with food, it's got a fungus in it. You know, it's a fungus that gives the spalting, and as soon as that becomes damp, it's active still. So I tend to try and avoid it. And also, alder is quite a soft material. It probably will absorb a lot of the food juices and things like that. So I'd probably avoid alder, if I'm honest.
And then a question from Simon. He's looking at dust extraction. Is it mainly health and safety or for cleanliness in the shop? What's the minimum requirement needed, bearing in mind it's a hobby, not a business?
Right. That's a long question. I'm going to answer that in a second. Ben, would you find me a knockout bar?
Yep.
I think Jason's taking it on holiday with him. So dust extraction. Oh, right, there it is. Dust extraction is it's not a luxury. Dust extraction is a necessity. It doesn't matter whether you're, and this isn't me with a salesman's hat on at all. This is this is me with my experience of 30 odd years of turning. It's something that I find really, really important. You will know, even if you turn once a month, the minute you go in from that turning session, if you don't have any extraction on, you'll feel it in your nose, you'll feel it on your chest. You get what I call a wood hangover. So the next day where you get heady, you get a headache, you could even feel sick, that sort of thing. So dust extraction is really important. Dust masks are your first line of defense, but they're not good enough on their own, because the amount of dust that's in the air will lie on everything. The minute you take your mask off, you're then exposed again, and they're not going to give you enough protection against a cloud of dust. So the best thing to do, get your dust extractor going. I tend to use air shifting extractors instead of vacuum extractors. I find that vacuum extractors are good at source, so they're good for plugging into power tools, into machines that are enclosed. But when you want to suck from further away, so you need that sort of air volume, then air shifters. So the type with impellers, or the vortex type, cyclones, those sorts of things, are the best ones to go for. And to be honest, they start at about 150 pounds and work their way up. Generally they go up in terms of, certainly with us here at Axminster, we'll go from a craft range up to a trade range, and all that means is the amount of time per week you use it. So if you are generally in a hobby situation, go for the craft range. If you're using it every day of the week, sort of 5 or 6 days, then go for a trade range machine. And then the next things to look at will be the volume. So how much dust and chippings do you want to extract at any one time? So if you're doing a lot of planing, a lot of thicknessing, all that sort of thing, then you need to go something with big collection in. Otherwise, you're going to be emptying it every 5 minutes. So no, it's not a luxury. It's really, really important. If you're into any sort of wood turning, the dust in the air is quite incredible. And it's not instead of your face mask. Your face mask and visor is as well as a dust extractor. The same with air filtration systems that you have on the ceiling. They're as well as a dust extractor and dust mask. Okay, hope that's answered that one. Okay, where are we? What are we doing? So, yes, I apologize, Jason. Sorry if you're watching. So what we're going to do, we're going to sand these now. Now, two forms of sanders. We've got a convex and we've got a concave surface here. Now, the convex one's easy. We just put our sanding disc on. We'll do that. And then we're just going to look at what we can use then to do the concave section. So you've seen my sanding disc before. It's no surprise. It's going to fit into our chuck. And on this chuck, I've got a set of C jaws here. Okay. And we're going to use sanding disc. Remember, I've got this fixed onto a Velcro backing. Okay. And all we do with this one, close the jaws up. Let's just kick the extractor out of the way a bit. Pop that on. And expand those jaws into the dovetailed recess of that faceplate ring. Get rid of our tailstock. We don't need that just for the minute. Dust extractor as close as we can get it. Lathe speed down to 0 because we've changed things on the lathe now. I don't want to give myself any surprises at all. Now I'm going to have the dust extraction on again just while we do this. That's running at about 500 revs. Too fast on this and you get dust everywhere. You also get a lot of burning, so not too fast. The grit size on the disc is 120 grit as well, by the way. Just a couple of little lines here. You can still see the bandsaw mark, so we're just going to work on those. Good thing with the disc sander is you take out lumps and bumps as well. It's like a plane almost. A little bit more and we're done on that face. That'll do us. There we are. You can see that nice grain coming through now. It's nice and clean. So now we've got to do the I would say the more difficult face, the concave face. So let's have a look at see what we can use on that. Yes, Ben.
So Nicholson's asking, is that like a homemade jig? The sanding disc there. Or is it something you could buy?
No, well, yes, it is homemade. So what I've done here, this is a faceplate ring. So this fits onto my chuck. It's designed to go into the C-jaws on the SK114. So yes, you could say it's homemade in terms of that, but you don't have to use a faceplate ring. You could use a regular faceplate. Just be aware that you take your chuck off and screw it straight onto the lathe. So that's not a problem. This is just a piece of birch ply. You could use MDF, any manufactured timber that stays flat. Timber tends to warp over time, move around a little bit. That's why I've gone with a manufactured material. So plywood or MDF. I've just tapered the back. So you've got a very slight taper. And then used Velcro strip. So we sell, Lily, if you're there, that 100 mil wide strip. Now, the reason I say that as opposed to going to a Velcro hook and loop disc is because if you use the strip, you can make your disc to the size you want or to the size of discs that you already have. So if you've got a power tool, a sander, so say a rotary sander, and you've already got a load of sanding discs, you can make a disc to suit that you can put on the lathe, and sand in that way. Or you might want a 12-inch disc sander, so you can make it suit. Now it's Velcro, you got the hook here, and it's got an adhesive on the back that you just stick straight to your plywood or your MDF. So yeah, easy one to make that one. Yes, Ben.
And so Vidal's asking, when doing a long spindle turning, wands for an example, what can he do to minimize the vibration in the timber?
We'll have to do a demonstration on that, whether that's me or whether that's Ben. We're not quite sure yet, but certainly making little ones have become more and more popular. I tend to, same thing as if I'm making chopsticks, use my hand as a guide. You can make your own guides, so traveling steadies, for instance, but I tend to find of those smaller projects, just using your hand to support a little bit easier. We'll do a future date on chopstick making. Ben might even do one on wand making. I know he's keen to do that. So we'll do that at a future date. But yeah, one hand on the timber as you're turning. Let me demonstrate that, or let Ben demonstrate that before you try it. It does, or look at some videos online, because it does need a little bit of demonstrating before you go into it. Yes, Ben.
And then Frederick's asking, have you ever stained or coloured your spatulas?
No. I haven't. I've seen some online with painted handles. I've seen some that have been the use of a pyrography machine has been used on them to some great decoration, but I haven't done any myself. No, not as yet. Maybe in the future. All right, right. So in terms of that internal curve, that's a difficult one. Now, if you weren't here and I'm running a batch of these off, what I would tend to do is put an old retired bobbin from a bobbin sander in the lathe and sand with the big one. So that goes into there. Get my other center in. That in the tailstock, I would use a single pointed center. And that works really well as a bobbin sander. However, you're not all going to be able to get these and use them in this way. So here's an alternative, which you've seen me use in my own workshop numerous times. Yes, Ben?
So Frederick's asking, on an AC 204WL, is there anything that can be attached to show what speed it's running at, apart from reading the belt speed on the pulley before you set it?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. You'll have a guide as to lowest and top speed. I would tend to divide it up. If you're not worried to be over accurate, I would tend to just divide it up like hands on a clock sort of thing. You use your 12 o'clock as your datum point and your start and your end point. That will give you a rough idea as to how fast. Is there a reason you need to know how... This is a silly question. Is there a reason you need to know the numbers? Are you being guided by somebody maybe that says you need to turn it at 1200, or are you using that for your learning? Because a lot of the time, certainly if you don't have a speed readout, then you're listening to the lathe, you're watching the lathe, you're feeling the wind rush, all those sorts of things to get your speed going. That's not the case when you're starting out and turning, because you won't have that experience, I know. But if you're trying to learn from somebody that's giving you speeds remotely, then I get why you need that. But yeah, do what I said. You know where you start, you know where you end. Halfway in between is going to be half the speed, and so on. All right. This is something that you probably recognize. Now we sell these individually, we sell them in sets, just little drum sanders. Just pop to number 2. Thanks, Steph. So you've got a little key in there which you just twist, and then you can take your abrasive out, renew your abrasive, and you're good to go again. These are really, really ace. They've even got a little hole in this end to use on the tailstock. So if I put a pin jaw in one of the chucks, let's go with my step jaws a second. You can use any pin jaws, set of jaws that go down to that size. Obviously, bring the tailstock up. Get your banjo out the way. There we are. We'll have the lathe running again. Sorry, the extractor running again. And we're going to sand on the bottom. There we are. You can see there that we're nearly there. A couple of little marks here and right at the front. I'm just going to do those and then we'll be ready to hand sand. You can go on and on and on with this. Do as much as you want. Yes, Ben.
And so Nixon's just asking, is that 100 grit on the drum?
It is 100 grit, yes. 100 grit on the drum sander, 120 on the disc sander. There we are. Just tidy up that front face. Just denib, take away any of those sharp edges. But it's quite important that that front face is fairly sharp, you know. That's it. What else there? See how sharp that front face is, just to give you a nice amount of grip when you're actually trying to grab something in the pan or push things around. Right, one more thing we're going to do to this. Now, I just forgotten that I haven't done the tidying up at the end there. But again, that will be straight on the disc. Straight on the disc and just sand it away gently, like you've seen me do on other sort of the smaller, craftier items. This, and then go to your rotary sander head, maybe at a 400 grit as well, just to finish off. A little bit of hand sanding, and all good. Right, one more little job to do. I mean, these are great. They are not just for this sort of job here, but for all sorts of turning based jobs where you need that concave area sanded. I use them on the Christmas things. You see me do the nutcrackers and the carousels, all that sort of stuff. These are used quite heavily on that. So little drum sander. Next, a little bit of finish. We've spoken about the finish already. I'm going to use the chestnut food safe foil. Good thing with this is it's completely clear. It's like water to look at. There's no amber in it at all. So it's going to be the palest finish of all. And I would give this a couple of coats. It's going to let it soak in, usually overnight. Let it soak in, then come back to it the next day, denib it slightly, give it another coat. You'll probably have to then, after a few uses, depending on what finish what you're looking for, usually after a few uses, it dulls back a little bit. So it might need a bit of denibbing and another little coat. And you can do that periodically for its life. That lovely colour coming out. We'll do the unsanded end as well, just because we can. Now, I'll just take off the excess. Don't allow any of that oil to pool on the surface. What you tend to find if you let things sort of lather up is they'll become sticky. Just let it soak in and then wipe off any excess. Denib the next day, then a second coat and you're done. There we are. Okay, any questions, Ben?
So Callan's asking, would anybody be able to do any colour effects on some wood turning bowl platters, etc.?
Oh, for the future, yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favourite things to do. That is, with the rippled ash that I keep whittering on about at the moment. There's lots of opportunities for that. Give me probably another 3 months for it to fully dry. We'll bring some rough turn pieces in that have dried, and we'll get some colour going. Because the ripples, any burl, anything like that, will really pick up on colour. But it's best done on pale timbers. Otherwise, the colour of the timber will affect the stain. So look for sycamores, look for maples, for pale ash, all those sorts of things, and you can get some really cool effect. Yes, definitely. All right. Okay. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed that. Remember what I said, though. Don't start with anything big. Start small. Okay. Once you've done something small, you can go up in size. I know you're going to get lots of orders as to what to make and sizes to make and all those sorts of things. But I hope you've enjoyed that, guys. And what have we got for the rest of the week? Ben, you are on Puzzle Box tomorrow. Puzzle Box tomorrow with Ben on the scroll saw. And then I'll be back in here. We're going to make some toys on Thursday. So some little spinning tops and a baby's rattle using the captive ring tool. Again, one of your suggestions in the past couple of weeks. So, guys, thank you very much. Join us again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Bye-bye.